we're starting to expand into having multiple directories. Directories is another word for folders in when we talk about like things that are happening on a computer. And we are going to create these folders so that we can put information in them and organize our websites according to a certain structure. And the reason I made a point about talking about this is that, as we learned from the video on Monday, folders in programming are a construct. So our folders are a construct, our files are a construct, everything is just kind of like a description of a path and a description of information that when we're actually dealing with the bits and bytes of the computer, like they're all over the place. So that's why a folder is called a directory, because it's like it's really a path to a collection of information that can be useful and not like a place. Exactly. CD in terminal means change directory. Perfect question. So we're going to open up our, I have CyberDuck as my, my FTP client, but you guys can follow along even if it's something else. So it automatically set me up in my, my server that I use for other work things, but we are going to open another connection. So when we're using, as you know now, the difference between FTP and SFTP, at NYU we use SFTP. So we're going to change that up here. And you can see it says SSH as well. And then your server is going to be, the username is the information that tells the server where to direct me. So instead of, as opposed to when we were doing SSH, we would write SSH and then the username at the server. Here we're just writing the entire server, and then our username will automatically put us in the correct directory. And then password, I'll stop sharing for a second. Okay, so I don't know why this is here. Okay, so here we are back at my login. So I have my username and password. Port is 22. That changes automatically when you change these, the type of connection that you have. But it's always good to check. Unknown fingerprint, I'm gonna say it's fine. Here are the same 3 folders that we had before, that you saw in the terminal last week. And we're going into public HTML, and here's all the files I made. You can see they're represented in a different way. This is a visual representation of what's going on. And we're going to create a new directory. So here there should be maybe somewhere, new folder. Okay, so in CyberDuck, it's under File, New Folder. If you are at a loss on how to make a new folder, usually a quick Google search of how to make a new folder, FileZilla, how to make a new folder in FileZilla will give you that information. Okay, so, and the homework asked for you to call it me. So we're going to create the folder. And now we still have to do the permissions work that we did last week in terminal. So we're going to look in actions, and in CyberDuck it's under info. And here you can see it says Unix permissions. So when we were in terminal or in command prompt looking at the server, we were in Unix, which is what the server is running. And it is, here it tells us what we can do. So this looks good. I, the owner, can read, write, and execute, which means I can change the code, I can run code that's in the file, I can, and I can read it, of course. And the group can read and run the file, but they can't change it. I don't know who is defined as the group according to NYU, but it's not me, right? So I'm like, there's no one I want to be able to change my files anyway. So we can assume that anyone besides me, the owner, or you, the owner in your directory, should not be able to change the file, but they can run it so they can see what's going on. So this is great that it's already set to this. And then in CyberDuck, there's this button that says apply changes recursively. So that means that it will give the same permissions to all the files that are inside the folder as well. So that's also great. And yes, I usually say always because I'm like, if I can read a folder, then like probably that means I also want to read what's inside the folder. And if there's a special file that for some reason I want to protect, I know that I will set it manually myself. So it's, for me, it's a safe bet to say that like we can always do that. You may have another preference. Okay, so here we have me. I'm going to double click into me, and me is empty. So I forget what they want you to name your file. Let's see. Does it make sense to you guys?
Why is there two of them?
Yeah, so you can have two files that have the same name. As long as they're in different folders, they're not going to conflict with each other because they're in different places. So they can be like radically different files, and because they're not in the same place, the computer's not confused that like if you try to put two files with the same name into the same place, usually it will ask you, do you want to overwrite this file? But in this case, we don't have that question because they're in two different places. So there's no conflict of naming. So that works out well for us because the index HTML is a special page, as you might remember from last week. So that means that when we go online and we look for SY737 dot, no, I6, there we go. And then tilde, yes, it saved it, great. And then if I go to .me, there's nothing here right now because the HTML file is empty, but it automatically, because it's that special index.html file, it automatically recognizes it as being the file to read first. So it's like the main splash page, if you will, like unifying file of all the other files that are there. And I'll demonstrate how this works. But so that index file is always like an invisible named file to the browser. So it's a clean way of going into different directories. Okay, so we have our index file, and because I don't want to remake my cat, dog, bird files, I'm just gonna pull them in here. Yes, I want to move them. And maybe I'll move these two. Maybe we'll find a use for them. So at this point, you can make you can either make new files that are called whatever you want, or you can copy files if you have them from another place. Okay, and now I want to edit this, so I'll download it, and we'll open up Atom, which is the editor that I'm going to use. This is our class website. And here in downloads, I will pull that into Atom, and we have our empty page. You remember doctype HTML, so Atom is auto-suggesting to me that maybe I want to write this, and I'm like, yes, I do. But it did this really annoying thing when I selected the suggestion. It didn't like complete what I wrote. It just like popped the suggestion in there. So if you use that, just be careful and like inspect what is written on your in your code to make sure you don't have any stray characters like floating around. Okay, there's a question, or maybe go check it out. Yeah, you guys can you can use Atom, you can use Sublime, you can use Visual Studio Code, whatever editor works for you, go for it. Okay, so we'll open and close our HTML tags, and you see that I'm opening and closing like the biggest, most encapsulating tag first, and then I'm going back inside and like filling in the things inside. And this is kind of standard practice in coding, because when you do this, you don't have to like look and read through your entire code and make sure that you did it right, because something that happens very often when you're writing like this long, like look at this horrifically long, thousands of 8,000 lines of code website, like I could easily lose track of the closing tags that are on some of these elements. So, oops, the Zoom interface is interfering with my Atom interface. Pardon me. Okay. So I can easily get lost and just make a huge mess, and so that's why I open and close all my tags, and then I go back in and like put the rest of the stuff in. So our standard HTML structure is everything is contained within this open and closed HTML tag. So that's how the browser knows that everything inside of it is HTML. And then we always have the head at the head. So it's kind of like modeled on the human body. We have the head on top and then the body. That's our metaphor, structural metaphor. The body below it. And the head contains all of the referenced codes, CSS, JavaScript, stuff like that for the most part. And the body is supposed to contain the content. Although HTML is very forgiving, and it will totally let you like, you can even type like hi, something like just some text outside of the code, and it will, why is this happening though? I just want one. Okay, there we go. And it will even probably render that just fine. So if I take my, and now we're going to see the joys of multi-factor authentication. So I'm going to put my index file back into the folder. It's asking me if I want to overwrite it. Yes. So you see two folders with the, or two files with the same name can't exist in the same space without it asking, the computer asking like which one should be prioritized. I'm surprised it didn't ask me for MFA, double authentication. If it, I was expecting to show that to you. So if it comes up while you're working and you're confused, just ask me on Discord or during office hours. But NYU added this thing where you have to like, while you're dragging and dropping a file, or after you say that you want to overwrite it, it sends you a push to your phone, and then you have to like say yes to the push, and then the file overwrites. Okay, so I've updated this index.html. So let's look at it. So there's my text that I wrote. Now this is wrong. We do not want to put content outside of the HTML tag. I'm not going to be able to format this content probably because it's outside of the tag, but the browser is showing it to me. So HTML and browsers in general are very forgiving. You can have things that aren't properly closed and it'll still work. It's not going to crash. Sometimes it will, but a lot of times it won't. But that doesn't mean that you want to leave this outside, because that makes it harder for other things to read your code. Like if somebody